Welcome back to another edition of Between Two FARS. I'm Warnicki Miller, and once again, I'm joined by the illustrious Robert Tepfer. The Bob has been practicing procurement law for over 45 years, almost 45 years, right around that mark. He won't tell us exactly how long. But veteran of procurement law, he is sharing his wisdom with us about the inspection and acceptance of goods under your contract. This is an important area, and in the last episode, we hit the basics. What do you need to put in your contract? Where do you find the contract clauses? And how do you get the people on your team, the contracting officer and the core, or whoever's going to be doing the inspecting, to understand the terms of the contract to make sure that you've got the right language in your contract? This episode, we're going to move a little bit into the administration of this clause and what happens if you deviate to the right or to the left of that language in your clause. So Bob's here today to give you some good warnings. Bob, what happens if you don't follow your inspection and acceptance language in the contract?
Oh, either one of two things. I mean, the bottom line is if you over-inspect, you have an inspector that feels that they have the standard, that they've been working in this area for 25 years and they know what is required, but it's not consistent with what the contract said we were entitled to. If they're not the same, then the higher standard that the inspector might be embracing may very well be a basis for a claim. Because remember, that contractor performed as we said he should, and there's always kind of a pressure to do it as cheaply as possible because they have to, win the award. And so if you say you want it at one level and not a higher level, they're going to give you the level that you said so that they can get the contract. And the problem you have is when the contract inspector makes it at a higher level, they're going to charge you the difference, what it took to perform to the standard in excess of what they were contractually obligated.
The phrase I usually see in claims and in litigation is Overzealous Inspector. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Oh, yes, they love that phrase, don't they?
And these folks, I mean, they're wonderful people, but they should have put that in the contract if that's the standard, or at least had a discussion of why it was necessary. When they tell you it's necessary, that's not entitling the United States to it. And sometimes they think that it does. They think that you're insulting their 25 years, and you have to say, no, you should have told me about that when we put it out for a bid at that time. And the difference is going to be what you're going to end up paying. And the contractor is absolutely entitled to that. Now, similarly, if the contractor performs the work and the inspector comes in and performs at a lower level, a lesser standard, and then subsequently it's found out after an acceptance that you didn't get what you contractually obligated them to do, you've really waived your rights because you had that opportunity, and inspection is conclusive except with regard to latent defect, fraud, and gross mistake amounting to fraud, absent there being a warranty provision. And even then,
we'll do a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
But just if you're just talking about your basic inspection, the lot of goods comes in and we're allowed to do X, Y, and Z testing on it before we accept it. But instead, the inspector just kind of looks over the batch, says, oh, these guys always do good work. I know it's probably fine, and accepts it. We may be waiving our rights if it turns out that batch isn't any good?
Absolutely. And that's why I want to bring in those three exceptions, and we'll discuss them in depth later, that they have to understand that it is conclusive. There are only specific exceptions, and there's a lot of case law in that area that have to be proved up, and we'll discuss that. And the inspector has to understand the responsibility because they have authority to bind the United States. Yes. And that authority coming from the contracting officer includes a waiver of an otherwise existing obligation. And it also means that if they adhere to a higher standard, obligating the United States to pay for, they are an authorized representative of the United States.
So the contracting officer needs to work closely with their inspector to make sure he's not overzealous or lackadaisical, but that we are employing the standards as written in the contract.
Yeah, and I would recommend that the easiest way to make certain that happens is to have that discussion before the contract, the solicitations put on the street. If they have a higher standard that their 25 years tells them is required, they need to have that discussion, point that out, and convince the CO to have language which clearly entitles us to it, so there can't be a claim. And the contract, a lot of contractors are quite willing to do that. But when you say you want something and they look around the contracting community, they know that the pressures are going to come in cheap. And so they won't give you anything more than what you asked for.
Yeah. So you heard it here, guys. Once again, work with your team and make sure everybody's coloring within the lines and applying the language as written. Next time on Between Two FARS, we're going to explore acceptance and inspection and acceptance a little bit further, and we're going to talk a little bit about the methods of inspection. So stay tuned, and we'll see you again next time Between Two FARS.